From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the juniors. Very important to remember the JR. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Glad you're watching. It is Monday in the city of New Orleans. A rainy Monday, at least the early part of the Monday here in the city of New Orleans. It's kind of cleared up a little bit as we've gone on throughout this day. We thought we were going to get a lot of rain this weekend. Didn't quite have the downpour that we thought, but all in all, it was a pretty good weekend for me. How was your weekend?
You know, it was cool. Saturday, I know it was supposed to rain like crazy, and of course, it didn't start until my wife and I went to this wedding we were supposed to go to over the weekend. Beautiful venue, set up everything outside. They had to move the whole thing inside. It's like your biggest nightmare when you're planning a wedding. But you know what? It was a beautiful ceremony. It was a lot of fun. Great cake, by the way, which is kind of the most important part of the wedding outside of the couple.
I love wedding food. Like
Yes.
the food at weddings are always really, really good. So glad you enjoyed that. I was out, if you saw me on a parade route, I wasn't riding or anything. I was just out there watching the Gretna Irish Italian St. Patrick's Day parade. That probably closes the book on the St. Patrick's Day celebrations. It felt like there's been quite a lot. There's been a couple that were canceled, rescheduled, and canceled again. So sorry for those folks. But nonetheless, we had a pretty good weekend ourselves. But we're back at it today, and I promised it. I promised it. You never want to under-promise or over-promise and under-deliver. But I'm going to promise and deliver today. It is Mock Draft Monday. Version 1.0 is out. You can go check it out on fox8live.com, or you can just stay right here. And we're going to go through each pick one by one. And, of course, Andre, that's where we're going to go with the big picture today.
Right. Where else could we go on Mock Draft Monday? You're going to do two of these. This is the first one.
Yes.
The second one will typically come out the week before the draft, maybe the week of the draft. We'll see how it's going. But we are starting with this one. Round one, Roger Goodell walks out. He's probably going to get booed, as he typically does. He's going to smile because he enjoys that. He's going to go through 8 other picks. And then he's going to say at number 9, the New Orleans Saints select with their pick, Sean.
All right. Well, I will. It's a huge. So many ways they can go at pick number 9 because it's top 10, and they're going to have a lot of opportunity here to pick an impact player. And I kind of whittled my list down to 7 players, and of those 7, the tiebreaker for me was the biggest need. And right now, as I look at the New Orleans Saints roster, the biggest need, and it's a must. It's not just a need; it's a must in my opinion. There is a massive hole at cornerback. So I chose, outside of Travis Hunter, the best cornerback in this class, Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, 6'2", 200 pounds. The only thing I don't like, well, a couple things I don't like, but he did miss half the season last year with a foot injury, but he does have 9 interceptions over basically 2.5 seasons, a playmaker. What I love about this player, when you watch him, he is incredibly smart at processing. We talk about processing a lot when it comes to a quarterback.
Yeah.
But when you're a DB, processing is also very important. You got to process the route combination that these offenses are trying to run on you, and if you can process it quickly, you can make a play on the ball. I mean, there are so many times on the tape where he is jumping a route and taking it to the house because he understood the concept that was coming through film study, through splits, and just based off of what a player does off the line of scrimmage. Another thing I didn't necessarily like was they played a lot of off coverage, at least in a lot of the tape that I watched. Will Johnson, you're not going to get away with that solely at the next level, but he can play zone. He's probably more of a natural zone corner. He can play man. And Brandon Staley is that hybrid defensive coordinator that like to run that cover 6 Vic Fangio scheme. It's that there are certain things where you play man, there's certain things where you play zone, and sometimes it's match man. So I think Will Johnson can come in and be a day one starter, and I think he can be an impact player. So Will Johnson is my first pick at number 9 overall for your New Orleans Saints.
And when I looked at Will Johnson, the phrase I wrote down was system and scheme proof, because it feels like he could fit into pretty much any defense. He excelled in zone coverage, like you mentioned. And when it comes to press man coverage, when he's able to get on the line and get his hands on you, you're not getting off. He excels. He's very physical in that. And I mean, he's 6'2" and he runs a 4.4. He's a freakish athlete. I mean, when you look at all of the, evaluations of him, the main critique that people have of his game is tackling.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't care if my corner can't tackle.
Right.
If you're doing a great job at corner in pass coverage, you won't have to tackle. Now, obviously, when it comes to, running the ball, you'd like to see that improve some, but tackling is not near, the top of my list of priorities.
You're down. You're the number one corner. You're the shut down the number one receiver. That's what you're there to do. If you got to tackle, That's great. Can you blitz a little bit off the edge? Maybe. Whatever the case may be. He's a bigger corner. So when you play man, you almost have to play press because you don't want to give too much cushion because sometimes those bigger corners, they're a little vulnerable to turning and running because, they are a little bit bigger. But all in all, I think this is a very good scheme fit for the Saints. I love this selection. Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan.
He takes a lot of risks, too, similar to Trayvon Diggs in Dallas, but it worked for him more often than not in Michigan. Now
he breaks on the ball. He goes.
He does. Now, that first-round pick, it's going to come down to need a lot, because we've spoken about a lot of potential options and who's going to be there, potential quarterbacks, receivers, corners, a running back, so it'll be very interesting to see who falls to 9. But if Will Johnson's the guy, I'm okay with it.
All right. Will Johnson's it. All right, round 2, what we got?
So we go to round 2 where we address something that was the big need last year, and you feel like there's a need to add to it this season.
All right, so round 2, pick number 40, and because they went corner first round, we know the Saints' tendency to draft either the offensive or defensive line very early in the draft, usually the first round, but not in this class unless they do some kind of trading up, which we don't want to see happen, at least on the surface. So I went back to the trenches, and I went Donovan Jackson, guard, Ohio State. This is a guy that's got, we understand the Saints pipeline. They love that pipeline from Ohio State players. This is a guy that's he played guard and tackle. As a matter of fact, played tackle in the national championship game against Notre Dame. This is a guy that's going to project to guard at the next level. The Saints have a massive need at that left guard position. You'd like to think a second-round pick could come in and be a day one starter, but I don't know if I would grant him that right away, but I would grant him day one compete to be a starter type player. You have Dylan Redunz over there. You have Will Clapp over there at that left guard spot. I don't know if there's any mixing and matching in terms of left side, right side, whatever the case may be, but he is not a center guard, which a lot of these interior linemen are. Yep. He is a guard tackle. So that's a little bit of a unique flexibility and versatility for Donovan Jackson, but that's who I went with at pick number 40, Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, and you don't see that left guard to left tackle very much because he was a spot player his freshman year.
Yeah.
Sophomore, he plays every game at left guard. Junior, he plays every game at left guard. Then as a senior, the left tackle gets hurt, and the coaching staff has so much confidence in him, they say, we're going to move our best left guard to left tackle. And that left tackle, he took on some tough pass rushers this year, and he held his own, including in the national championship. So, I mean, even getting a player with the ability that he has, with the versatility that he has, and you watch him run block, he is a beast. He is a beast. Nasty run blocking. If you look at the way that he blocks in some of those runs, and Ohio State did a lot of those last year between Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So Donovan Jackson, very good player to get kind of in that early second round. Yep. I guess the biggest question is, offensive line is kind of a secure position. Would you add to that?
I would, because I know their history. I think you've got a starting 5, but maybe. You've got a couple players capable of a starting 5, but if you add another young player to the mix, if nothing else, if he's not ready or he doesn't win the competition, he can be valuable depth for that rookie year and then become the starter at some point. So I just think, their belief in the trenches, I can't see them bypassing an offensive lineman or defensive lineman early in the draft. The only question I have is he available at 40? Because sometimes you get high second, late first. Sometimes those grades can really merge. So that's the only worry that I have for Donovan Jackson.
Right. So we head into the third round for the Saints, and it's a name that if you watch this podcast consistently, you have heard fairly recently, Sean. Who do you think the Saints go with the first pick in round 3, number 71?
That was the reason why I brought him up, guys. There was a reason why I brought him up. Another one where I don't know if it's just I'm noticing it more, or if it's just he's just moving up draft boards. But this is another one where I don't know if the Saints are going to get away with drafting him at third round, 71 overall, because I think a lot of people are onto it. Because the last few rounds of mocks that I've seen, it's been more the back end of the second round. But for this mock draft, I am going But the third round, pick 71, Iowa State wide receiver Jaden Higgins. Again, we talked about Jaden Higgins a lot in that last pod. Was it last week?
I think it was Wednesday last week.
Okay, Wednesday of last week.
Monday or Wednesday, one of those.
6'4", 217 pounds. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Had a really good receiver next to him at Iowa State as well, and Jalen Noel. This is a guy that I believe, if Tate McMillan's number one in terms of big receivers, I think he's got to be number two. And I'm not sure there's a huge drop-off. And I understand that and when it comes to wide receiver, it's not just what they can do. It's sort of okay, is he a big receiver, small receiver? Is he a route runner? Is he a fast guy? Is he a body control guy? Is he a possession receiver? Is he a catch radius guy? This guy is a catch radius guy, 50-50 ball guy, got really good speed for a big man, 4.47, 40-yard dash. The Saints need a big receiver. And unlike some other positions where, like cornerback or guard, where you might, the backup doesn't necessarily play as much. A wide receiver, you could be the 3 and still get on the field a lot. So not only do I think this is a good value pick, I think he gets on the field pretty early if they make this selection. So Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State, is the third-round pick.
And he brings something to this receiver room that they don't have right now, because you look at the receivers on the team. Chris Olave, he's a route-running guy. Rashid Shaheed, speed, run that go route. We saw how dangerous he was early in the season last year. Brandon Cooks, another smaller receiver. Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr., Bub Means. We saw so many of them last year. Last year, it really emphasized the need for depth at this receiver position, because after Olave and Shaheed went down, you look around, and until you bring in Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think in week 9 or so, you really don't have anybody who can give you competent play at that receiver position. So bringing in a Jaden Higgins, a guy who's 6'4", runs a 4.4, has that catch radius, can go up and make a catch over anybody in the nation, at least collegiately. We'll see if he can do it at the NFL level. I think that he brings something very valuable to this room, and being able to get him mid-round in the third round, I think that's good value.
Yeah, I mean, and who works the seams for the Saints right now as roster's currently constructed? I mean, Juwan, obviously, is the tight end, but you need a receiver that can do that as well. I mean, we saw it for years that it's glorious work with Marcus Colston and Jimmy Graham when they were on the field together. I mean, when you work those seams, I mean, that's where you can do a lot of damage. So to me, this is a guy that's hopefully built for that, and he's a red zone 50-50 guy. I mean, look, 6'4" versus 5'11", and 6'4" versus 5'11". Yep. So I like the pick. What's next?
Up next is another familiar name, but not because we've brought him up on the podcast before, but because if you're, living in Louisiana or watch a lot of SEC football, you've probably heard his name on Saturdays. The Saints' second pick of the third round at number 93. Who do they draft?
All right, this is your LSU guy, my annual LSU guy in the Saints mock draft, Braden Swinson, edge pass rusher. I think this is great value at 93. I mentioned when I got back from LSU's Pro Day, I was a little disappointed. I didn't get to see him run. He didn't do anything at LSU's Pro Day, but he's 6'4", 255 pounds. Prototype for that 3-4 edge guy, stand-up edge guy, not the strong side hook guy, the stand-up edge player on the weak side that, gets after the quarterback. And you watch his growth from his first year to second year in Baton Rouge to 8.5 sacks. And what I really love about him is how much – I don't know if if he's available third round as an edge pass rusher, there's going to have some flaw in his, scouting report. And I don't know if he's got an elite first step, but what I love about him is he never gives up on the play, ever. Even when he's blocked out of the play, I'm talking out of the play, out of the screen, you'll see him come back in and make a play on a running play or if a quarterback's holding on to the ball too long. So to me, Braden Swinson is a guy, if you can grab him at this point, at that true edge, not someone you're trying to convert to stand-up edge, a true outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it, I think Braden Swinson can be a nice fit for the Saints defense.
And this is somebody who over the last decade the Saints probably wouldn't have taken a look at because of the system that they're running. But with Brandon Staley coming in as the new defensive coordinator, you kind of assume that he's going to start to lean towards that 3-4 system that he's tended to run throughout his career. And Braden Swinson would be a fit for that. And one thing, when you watch Braden Swinson, he's not superior physically. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy. He may not even be the most skilled guy. But when you watch him on Saturday, somehow, some way, he winds up in that backfield. he winds up hitting that quarterback. He winds up making a tackle on the running back. You could say, what he doesn't have, you could pick apart his game. But when you turn the film on and you look at Braden Swinson, he is consistently making a play, hurrying the quarterback. He's back there. And that's what you can ask out of. That's all you can ask really out of your edge rusher.
Yeah, and look, if he doesn't get on the field, this is a guy that can work, compete, do some special teams early, find some way to get him on the field. So I think this is good value, and it's a familiar face that a lot of y'all know about. So Braden Swinson, the second, third-round pick at pick 93 for the Saints.
And now as we head into the fourth round, it's back-to-back-to-back picks who may sound familiar to you, because now we go to another guy who we brought up last week when we talked about potential gems in the mid-round, Sean.
Yes. On that same podcast, I mentioned this player. This is my favorite pick of the mock. This is my favorite one, and I just checked around a little bit just to see. And I got a little bit of feedback, not on this player in particular, but the running back class as a whole is very deep this year. Very, very deep this year. And there's a consensus out there that day 3, you're going to get some really good football players at the running back position. And I hope Giddens is available, because that's what I'm going with. DJ Giddens, running back from Kansas State. We talked about him in that same pod with Jaden Higgins. He's a little bit of a tall-ish back at 6'1". But this guy is very shifty for a tall back. I think he's a guy that can hit the hole, make you miss, and go. He's got that home run ability. I think he's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit, because this is a lot of names at the running back position. And they can't all go early. Like, you check some of the running back rooms, the running back lists. I saw ESPN had him at 9. I saw another ranking had him at the 7th best running back. I had him up higher than that. Like, to me, if I were a GM, this would be too late. But I think just realistically, just kind of scanning the mock drafts and doing my own sort of research, I think this is a comfortable. I would hope the Saints would have an opportunity to get him at round 4, 112. DJ Giddens, running back, Kansas State. I think he'd be a nice compliment to Alvin Kamara, and perhaps in a draft that isn't as running back heavy, you might be talking about a second round pick in DJ Giddens. So that is my guy at 112. DJ Giddens, running back, Kansas State.
Yeah, and you touched on it in the beginning. He is a really big guy, and you kind of look at his frame, and you would think, oh, that's a strong, powerful runner. That's not necessarily the case. Now, he's no feather in there either. He's not a pushover, but when he gets, that handoff, the way that he hits the hole and he's patient with it, he reminds me of a Le'Veon Bell back in the day with the Steelers, when Le'Veon Bell would seem like he's basically gliding back there, just waiting for that hole to come up. And when he sees it, he hits it, and he's gone. And that's what I see in DJ Giddens. Back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons at Kansas State. He did a little bit of receiving work, about 300 yards in each season. Now, obviously, playing with Alvin Kamara, you can learn a lot about the receiving aspect of the game from that position. Working with somebody who just came off working with Saquon Barkley, like Kellen Moore, I think DJ Giddens will be able to pick a lot from this team and this roster and this coaching staff.
I love the value there. All right, what's next?
Up next, we head later into round 4, pick 131 for a position that the Saints desperately need and have needed for a while.
Yeah, if you watched a lot of football, you probably saw this guy quite a bit because they were on TV a lot. That's Texas tight end Gunnar Helm. Look, solid, pretty safe. I don't think he's going to wow you with measurables, but he understood what they were trying to do in that Texas scheme, benefited a lot from the Texas scheme. I think this is a guy that can give you I think he can give you what Foster Moreau gives you. I think this is good value. I think he'll be a willing blocker in the run game. He'll do what he has to do to get on the football field. Again, 4th round, I think this is good value. You're not going to get the best tight end available in the 4th round, but you are going to get a guy that I think's had a lot of very good college football experience, playing a high-end system and some very big football games. And I think he understands with that Sarkisian offense what they're trying to do from a schematic standpoint, and that hopefully can translate to the next level. Gunnar Helm, tight end from Texas, is the 2nd, 4th round pick for the Saints.
It addresses a need. I mean, we talked for years about how it's been a long time since the Saints really had a playmaker at tight end. Gunnar Helm, a former basketball player, and we've seen how some of these former basketball players have kind of transitioned into being big-time NFL tight ends. Now, he's not a blocker at all. He's obviously the blocking part of his game is going to have to develop. He is a straight receiving threat. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm fine with that because that's what the Saints need right now in that passing game.
I think he's good. I know we got to run out of time here, so we'll speed this up a little bit. So Gunnar Helm is the 4th-round pick at 131. I think that's a pretty solid selection. So what's up next?
So now we go to the 6th-round pick, 184, for one of the more unique picks in this mock draft, Sean.
Yes, I'm going with Notre Dame quarterback / athlete, Riley Leonard. Notice I added the / athlete for a very good reason. I do not believe Riley Leonard is going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he can develop into a backup quarterback in the NFL. But when I watched him in the Sugar Bowl, I've been holding this back for a while, but when I watched him in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, the way he ran with great speed, great vision, but also great power really had me thinking, because this is a team that's obviously embraced Taysom Hill over the years, and he's not Taysom Hill. We understand that. No one's Taysom Hill, and everyone. And you're gonna go broke if you keep trying to find the next Taysom Hill. But I think this guy can provide some hybrid-like ability that could provide value at this stage of the game of the draft. So Riley Leonard, QB / athlete, is the 6th-round pick for the Saints. I know that might get the comments going a little bit. What do you think of that pick?
It was very interesting because you look at him, he runs a 4.5 40. That's pretty good for a quarterback.
Yeah.
And then you look at his stats. You see 184 rushes, 906 yards, 17 rushing touchdowns that year. You think, oh, man, that running back had a pretty good year.
Yeah.
No, that was as a quarterback.
Right.
Nearly 1,000 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. Those 17 touchdowns, by the way, more than Tulane's Mekhi Hughes, more than Quinshon Judkins with the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, more than Omarion Hampton for North Carolina, who's
another
probably
great
going to
running
be
back,
the
right?
second running back drafted after Ashton Jeanty in this draft. You know, Riley Leonard, for what he was able to do in that system and really embracing his role, he was impressive for what they had him doing. Now, obviously, whether he converts to a full-time quarterback, that's a big jump because he's going to have to develop a lot of things that he wasn't asked to do at Notre Dame. But in this kind of slasher role, I think I like Riley Leonard.
And he's a guy that, look, before he transferred to Notre Dame, there was some talk about him being, a big first-round pick guy. I don't think he's going to do that. But 6th round might be a little bit too late. They didn't have quite the skill on the outside of Notre Dame, but they really used their personnel well, and they maximized it, got all the way to the national championship game. He really embraced the role up there. And he's from South Alabama, the Alabama. I think he's from Alabama area, so I think he's got some familiarity with the South. So Riley Leonard, round 6, 184. What's next?
Now we head to the 7th round for a player that you recently saw over at the Saints practice facility.
That's it. Yeah, he really came on my radar then. And, at this point in the game, you're looking for somebody that can hopefully stick and provide some special teams value and some depth. That is Tulane safety / DB Caleb Ransaw. Ran an electrifying 40 at Tulane's Pro Day. He was a guy that really helped himself at the Pro Day. I talked to John Summerall about him after. We all kind of did. He said he believes Ransaw can play all 5 positions, which is nickel, which is safety, which is outside corner. So it's a guy that's got some position versatility, which is obviously something that you need, especially on the bottom end of that roster. He's a guy that can provide hopefully some special teams depth. If he doesn't, he's not going to make the team. But this is a guy that I think, given his speed, given his versatility, at 248, I think this is solid value for the Saints.
He runs a 4.3. He's got a 40-inch vertical, nearly an 11-foot broad jump. He is a freak of nature when you talk about an athlete. Now, obviously, there's still some things to learn when it comes to, playing safety in the NFL, but you can't teach speed, you can't teach vert, and you can't teach some of the things that he can do physically. So if the Saints can develop him, he might be a steal in the 7th round.
And look, obviously he's got the local connection, and look, there is a need at safety. You've got the top 2 guys, but you need some depth. You always need depth everywhere.
Yeah,
so
we saw how
look,
much a lack of depth hurt last year.
I think Jordan Howden's a guy that they had high hopes for, but this is coming up on year 3, and he hasn't been able to really take the job or kind of ascend into the role they wanted him to be. So I think that's somewhat open for competition. So Caleb Ransaw is the pick at 248. And there was one more pick left. Is that correct? Where are we at?
254, the last pick for the Saints in the 7th round, and it is whom?
I love doing this in mocks. I really do. I love doing this. I do this often in previous mocks. You've probably seen it. I'll go with an uncommon position. Sometimes it's a fullback. Sometimes it's a kicker. Sometimes it's a punter. We're going with a punter.
Oh, yeah.
Special teams, Florida State's Alex Mastromano. Look, not much went right for Florida State last year. We understand that. He was on the field a lot.
Yeah.
So you got to see him a lot. Had a 6th round grade when you look at some of the guys that are up to be drafted in the NFL draft. But he has a draftable grade. Not all teams have draftable grades on punters. I think there needs to be competition everywhere. New era, new coaching staff, come in, competition everywhere. To me, that includes the punter position. If you can get a little bit better at punting, a little bit better at field position, so be it. That all helps in the ultra-thin line in winning and losing games. So I close out the draft with a player that I think would have a chance, and it's only going to beat one other person. Matthew Hayball. So I think Alex Mastromano is someone I would look at if I were the Saints. So he is my 7th-round pick at 254.
Yeah, and you talk about somebody who had a lot of practice punting last year, Matthew Hayball. He had the 6th most punts in the NFL last year, 30th average distance in the NFL last year. Not a lot of big, long, booming punts, but to his credit, he was number 1 in the number of punts that he pinned within the 20-yard line. You know, and you talk to coaches all the time, and they always talk about creating competition. That's what brings your team up, bringing in another punter. And we've seen the Saints do this the last couple off seasons. They'll bring in a second punter to compete with their guy, and sometimes you get surprised, and you get a Matthew Hayball that's starting the season, or the Australian punter
Lou Headley.
Yeah, Lou Headley the year before that. So you never know when it comes to Saints and punters.
How much time we have left?
About 30 seconds.
About 30 seconds. Yeah, look, at this point, 7th-round picks don't always make the team. So you want to draft someone you think has a chance to make the roster. Because at this point, 254 and undrafted guys, the grades are a little all over the place. So hopefully give yourself a chance to make the roster with Mastromano. So that's the picks. 9 of the Saints mock draft. Fazande's mock draft 1.0 for the Saints.
Let us know in those comments how you think Sean did, who you might pick in some of those spots. If you like the picks, love the picks, hate the picks, we want to hear about it regardless. Let us know.
Let us all know. All right, we'll be back on Wednesday for Andre Johnson Jr. I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.